benefits. The effects could be felt across seasons with the San Diego Chargers and the Washington Redskins. Walt Sweeney, number 78 here, was one of the NFL's top offensive linemen. But throughout his career, Sweeney was taking drugs. Some, he says, supplied by team doctors. Now 55, his addiction has left him unable to hold a job. And yesterday, a federal judge in San Diego ordered the NFL Players Association to pay Sweeney $1.8 million in disability benefits dating back to his retirement in 1976, a decision which could have far-reaching implications for every American worker.
Now keep your eyes on number 78 on this play. That's the sadistic Walter Francis Sweeney nailing the ball carrier, Guerin, again on a kickoff return. The Chargers' first draft choice in 1962. Sweeney had his own fan club.
Well, I remember my first game with the Chargers in 1963. I'd never been around amphetamines. I think the strongest thing I ever took was a no-dose at Syracuse. And I was taking these little pills that they were passing out, and I couldn't feel anything. I didn't realize it took, an hour or whatever to get in your bloodstream. And instead of taking 5 or 6 like everyone else was doing, I ended up taking 20. And by the time that game was over, I thought my heart was going to burst through my chest. It was beating so fast. I would say the most motivating factor to take the amphetamines is the level of competition. There's always someone breathing down your back. The coaches used to play off one player against the other. They make you feel very insecure. We were kind of kept in that mode of fear. And we would take anything to get an edge. I was an offensive guard, and I was right down there in the pit, playing against the biggest guys on the team. And there's hitting on every play. The older I got, the more I needed the drugs. And towards the end, I was taking them for practice as well as game day. The thing that drove me to this lawsuit was my wife, Nancy. She saw what effect all those drugs had on me. Erratic behavior, loss of memory, not being able to hold a job, just a foul-tempered person. I didn't realize it would all come to this. I believe we won because we're right. It's a victory for me, but hopefully it's going to be a victory for hundreds of other guys that are out there that have the same problems that I do. When I first won the decision a couple of years ago, they said I would never see a cent of money from them. And I won't believe it till I do see it.
Two different perspectives on the Walt Sweeney case. We're going to be talking to sports contributor Tim Green, who played in the NFL for 8 seasons. He's here with me in the studio, and our legal editor Arthur Miller is joining us now from WCVB TV in Boston. Let me get a quick reaction from each of you before I go to a commercial, and then we'll come back and talk some more. This decision, you hail it?
I feel bad for Walt Sweeney. I understand. I mean, I played in the pit too, so I know what that's like. I know what the stress is like. However, I can't see how we're going to hold the NFL Players Pension Fund accountable for what's happened to his life after and the decisions that he's made that's led him to his addictions.
Interesting. You say the decisions he's made, because that's a key point. Arthur, your reaction to this?
My reaction is the opposite. The team made the decisions, subjected him to risks, and Sweeney's case is no different from any case involving a worker who is subjected to a hazard without his consent in any employment situation in the United States these days, Charlie.
That's interesting. I thought one of you would think it was a bad decision and one of you would think it was a good decision, but I thought it would be the other way around. Let me take a commercial break. I'll come back. Tim, Arthur, and I will be talking about the Walt Sweeney ruling and how
things like that was a lot more than it is today, or it is 8 years ago, 10 years ago when I played the game. However, I mean, as I said, I played in the same pits. I know what it's like. I know the pressure, and there is pressure. There's pressure from coaching staffs. There's pressure from the medical staffs. But the most pressure comes from teammates and from within the player themselves. Because you heard Walt Sweeney also in his own words say he did it because of fear. He did it because there was always someone breathing down his neck trying to take his job away.
Arthur, you say it's a good decision, and yet if you take this precedent, aren't we in a situation airline pilots can say, look, I had a lot of stress, it turned me into an addict. I could say, look, a television host job, high stress. You could say, look, a legal professor, high stress, turned me into an addict. This seems to me opens the floodgates.
It only would apply, Charlie, if the team, the employer, creates a dangerous environment, the way asbestos companies did for asbestos workers, the way uranium companies did for miners. If an organization knows it's exposing people to a risk, a hazard, giving them amphetamines, it has a duty to inform, it has a duty not to do it, it has a duty not to create the kind of pressure that existed at that time, Tim's right, in the NFL.
But Arthur, Tim just said, and it's a good point, the player can say no.
Sure, the player can say no. That's wonderful public policy, that the employer can ask you to do illegal acts, to ply your trade, and you've got a choice. Either you go on the unemployment list or you commit a crime.
No, Arthur, I wasn't unemployed. I mean, I continued to play, and a lot of guys continue to play without drugs. Now, you're talking about miners and you're talking about asbestos workers. They can't continue in their profession and not be exposed to those dangers. But
Tim,
you can continue. You can play football.
You may be the perfect ball player, but remember Rudy Tomjanovich, who gets punched in the
now
nose?
You're getting into that legal. You
missed the tackle too.
Yeah,
very few.
Remember Bill Walton, who was misdiagnosed by a team physician? Remember Dale Hackbart, who was hit with an illegal block? This is right out of the sports world. These are ball players subjected to risks they did not consent to because the team did things
However,
that failed
Walt
to
Sweeney
protect them.
consented to taking those drugs, and in his own words, the first amphetamines he took, when he took 20, didn't come from the team. They came from 2 of his teammates in the locker room.
Obviously, the judge in that case felt that the team was a contributing factor and put pressure on him to take drugs. Perhaps he never knew what the nature of those drugs were. We don't know. I suspect the judge looked at that in the evidence.
Taking hits on a football field, Arthur, is one thing, but taking drugs, it seems to me, is another here.
That may be true, but the court found that the taking of those drugs at the instigation of the team was football-related, was work-related. And we live in a world in which workplace safety has come front and center as a major American issue as a result of crazy things like asbestos and coal mine dust and uranium.
I think Arthur's wrong. I think that to do this, the practical reality is you're going to have football players coming out of the woodwork and you're going to break the NFL pension fund.
Well, that's a sad byproduct. There's no doubt that Tim's right that this is going to put pressure on the fund, but it establishes a principle for the future.
All right, Arthur Miller, Tim Green, interesting to hear both of you come at this. I appreciate it. Good Morning America continues. Stay with us.
People expect more from my teeth because my husband's a dentist. We use Mentadent.
Mentadent's unique formula actually targets plaque. It works like no ordinary toothpaste.
Can suffer from depression bad enough to need medical attention. But the scientific panel found what these patients experienced. Depression is rarely treated promptly or adequately.
It's not treated, in my opinion, with the same respect as some of the other medical conditions in this country.
Drugs and psychotherapy can control depression, but many delay getting care. The stigma associated with mental illness is one reason, but the other is doctors.
We have, unfortunately, no thermometer for depression, no throat culture for depression at this point. We have just the ability of a physician to sit and talk with a person.
But too often doctors don't take the time with their patients. For 15 years, Paolo Del Vecchio was depressed, but he had to talk about committing suicide before doctors took his symptoms seriously.
They basically said that this is something that everyone goes through, that you just got to toughen it out.
Depression is 3 times more prevalent among women in their reproductive years, and that has made its treatment more difficult. Psychiatrists have been torn over whether to prescribe antidepressant drugs during pregnancy, but a new study shows that the babies of women who took drugs such as Prozac while they were pregnant suffered no ill effects. So the challenge now is to get treatment for those who need it.
So you're feeling some losses.
But that will likely depend on a change in attitude about the disease. George Strait, ABC News, Washington.
Our money editor, Tyler Matheson, joins me with really part 2 of his guide on how to secure your parents' future, a subject that we started talking about last week.
That's right, a little more this week, specifically on long-term care. It's estimated that 32% of all nursing home costs are paid for by patients and their families. This year alone, nursing home care costs on average $40,000. But long-term care insurance is helping to ease the burden for some people. Kathleen Connolly of Michigan found herself relying on it when her 78-year-old mother, Alma, became disabled and needed round-the-clock care.
She had suffered a stroke that affected visual processing and action initiation. We either had the option of a nursing home or bringing her home. They explained that Medicare would pay for a nursing home. They would not pay anything at all toward home care. My father had been a saver and a wise investor, and he left my mother fairly well provided for. There really wasn't any other decision. She's my mother, I love her, and wouldn't put her in a nursing home.
But Kathleen's full-time job as a systems analyst for a bank left her unable to stay home and care for her mother.
It costs us $14 an hour to have someone here. They're usually here 10 to 10 and a half hours a day, so that's about $140, $150 a day. Pretty close to $30,000 a year.
Fortunately, 3 years before her stroke, Alma bought a long-term care policy that covers about half the cost of her home care. The premium's about $1,200 a year.
The policy covers 1 year, and it's not a calendar year, it's 365 days of home care. The benefit is $70 a day, so whatever is over and above that we pay. It's not reimbursed by the insurance company.
In addition to those out-of-pocket costs, Kathleen is also paying higher bills for groceries, laundry, and utilities.
Last year I didn't put any money in the bank at all. It makes me just so aware of the cost of care, and if you don't plan, you could really end up in a very sad situation.
These are all interesting cases, and I think they're so interesting to somebody like me because I must admit I don't know anything about this. And when you get to this situation, chances are you haven't had a chance to think about it much in advance. Number one, something she said I didn't realize. Medicare, Medicaid don't pay for home care.
They pay only a very small amount of it. Medicare will pay for some of it, but not all of it. And basically the mistake that a lot of people make is that they think that Medicare is going to cover them for home care and for nursing home care. It's very limited, only 100 days of coverage under Medicare, and then only if you've been put in the nursing home after a hospital stay. Medicaid obviously is for people who are below the poverty line basically and can qualify by rules that vary from state to state. You either have to have very low income and very low assets. So it's very tricky there, and so a lot of people find themselves caught.
But you really can't count on it for home care, and you can't count on it even very long
for nursing
care. So in the case of the Connollys, for instance, you mentioned that she had a long-term policy, but it only covered a year.
It only covered a year, and that was probably the weak point in her policy. Excuse me. It goes on. She will be able to get some coverage under that policy if her mother then goes into a nursing home. But the weak spot there is that she's going to probably outlive the benefits under her policy.
All right, so when you're looking at long-term care insurance, what should you look for?
Well, let's look first at who should buy it, number one. And who should buy it are people who have substantial assets. Generally, we say couples with assets of more than $100,000 and single people with assets of $50,000 or more, because people who have less assets than that are probably going to spend down those assets and then fairly quickly qualify for Medicaid, which is the program for the indigent. The other things you want to look at are what is the affordability question? And here there's actually news. The Kennedy-Kassebaum bill last year allows people with certain restrictions to deduct the premiums they pay for long-term care insurance and also to receive the benefits tax-free. So that's another thing here that you need to look at. But the cost of these policies is high. For a 65-year-old, a good policy with what we call inflation protection, about $1,500 a year. So it's quite serious. The other thing you need to look for
so it's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
You have to look at it whether you really should get it. All right, then comes the question of what it is.
What to look for. What you need to look for are a variety of things. Number one is the affordability of it. Can you pay the premiums out of your current income? And the basic rule of thumb is that if you're going to be paying more than 5, 6, 7% of your total income on these insurance policies, you're probably getting pinched a little too much. Look very closely at what these policies cover. Does it cover cover home care? Does it cover nursing home care? Where is the coverage provided? Who must provide it? These things are written very, very carefully and closely. Make sure you absolutely understand, because you don't want to find out that the policy you bought doesn't cover the kind of care you or your loved one needs. What are the daily benefits? In her case, it was $70 a day. A good policy will cover $100 of benefit a day for both nursing home care and for in-home care. Let's look at a couple of other things. What is the term of the coverage? Here, the general rule is 2 to 3 years will probably be sufficient for most people, because most people's need for that care is less than that. But you need to move along. Exclusionary periods, how soon do the benefits kick in? And last, what is the inflation protection? 5% compounded inflation protection. That means will the benefit increase over time as the cost of nursing homes increase?
If you want these policies, are you automatically assured of getting them, or will they find you uninsurable?
Very good point. A lot of people, by some policies, as many as 40% can't qualify because of past medical history or current medical situation. If you already have the need for a nursing home, if you already have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they probably will not, almost definitely will not insure you.
All right, but something you ought to know about plan ahead for.
Absolutely.
Tyler Matheson, thanks very much. Good advice. Next, a herniated disc, one of the most common and most painful back ailments you can get. Our Dr. Nancy Snyderman will look at its causes, treatments, and Good Morning America continues here on ABC.
With dozens of offices dotting Vermont's main streets and nearly a century of service to Vermont's communities, Chittenden Bank has provided the kind of personal service you'd expect from a local bank. And today, through our connection to global financial networks, you'll find when you bank with Chittenden, there really is a world of difference. Chittenden Bank, member FDIC.